add the irritation, subtract the sleep, divide the happiness, and multiply the problems. But here at Morning at NTV, we are ready to make sure that your Monday morning is going to be superb. So will be the rest of the week. Join me, Brian Mlondo, Mabel Kebirunji, Joel Senyonyi, Simon Kasiate, and Ismail Dakaba Chigongo, right here on NTV. Let's get started with the question of the day. This beautiful mug could be yours if you just help us answer that simple question on our Facebook page, Morning at NTV. You can like the page, but also follow us on Twitter at Morning at NTV. You can tag us at MBGold2, at Mebkeb, at Joel Senyonyi, at Kasiate, at Dakaba Chigongo. And of course, our SMS platform, which is 6565. Good luck to the first 5 respondents. And my friend, this could be yours. Now, unless, obviously, if you are an England supporter like Mabel, Monday could be disastrous for you. Mabel, I know you are waking up. Yeah, definitely. Your week is not starting very, very well. How was your weekend, Mabel?
Brian, I told you that the pitch was bad, didn't I, on Friday? So at least I have an excuse. But otherwise, I had a great weekend, and I am glad to be here in the studio this Monday morning. A very welcome, good morning, welcome to you all, wherever you're joining us on air and online. We'll continue Morning at NTV by taking a look at the news making headlines. KCCA pays a sum of 1.8 billion to 34 councillors. General Katumba Wamala urges soldiers to maintain high standards of discipline, and Uganda's defense budget hits 1 trillion shillings.
You're watching Morning at NTV with Simon Kasiate, Mabel Kebirunji, and Brian Molondo.
Once again, a warm welcome to Morning at NTV. My name is Mabel Kebirunji. It has emerged that Kampala Capital City Authority paid out a sum of 1.8 billion shillings as salaries to 34 councillors for no work done. The sum accumulated over 12 months since councillors stopped holding meetings following the impeachment of the Lord Mayor Erias Lukwago. Solomon Seranja has more.
The political wing of Kampala Capital City Authority has been in limbo for 12 months since its last sitting on the 29th of May last year. The failure to hold meetings sparked off the impeachment process of the Kampala Lord Mayor Erias Lukwago, who some councillors accused of misconduct, abuse of office, and incompetence. The Lord Mayor has had a string of legal battles ever since his impeachment, which many observers describe as controversial. The latest case at the Supreme Court challenged an order of the acting Chief Justice Stephen Kavuma that barred Erias Lukwago from performing his duties at City Hall. In the absence of the Lord Mayor, the council has not conducted any session and is awaiting the Supreme Court ruling on Lukwago's fate. Although City Hall authorities immediately stopped paying Lukwago his salary, councillors continue receiving their salaries. Every month, a KCCA councillor receives a retainer fee of 2 million shillings, mobilization allowance of 2.45 million shillings, sitting allowance of 200,000, and transport allowance of 100,000. Besides the sitting and transport allowances, councillors are paid a net salary of 3.1 million shillings, which has cost the authority 1.8 billion shillings over the past year. The big question is why the 34 councillors continue getting paid for no work done.
No. The councillors are doing their usual oversight. They failed to sit because of the problems, you know. Even before the Lord Mayor was evicted by the councillors, they were not meeting. He refused to call the meetings. That's one of the reasons why they censured him. Okay? The councillors have a duty to oversee work in their divisions.
The Minister for Kampala, Frank Tumwebazi, also says that KCCA has since set up committees to run the affairs of the authority.
I constituted them into working groups, okay? they supervise the budgets of the directorates. They refer to me reports. So beyond oversight, any elected leader has no any other job. So it's oversight in their divisions, it's oversight at the central level because they supervise the directorates.
But the troubled Lord Mayor says the minister's actions are illegal.
Bwana Frank Tumwebaze, where on earth do you get powers to arrogate yourself the duty of convening authority meetings, to establish working groups, those barazas or clubs, discussion, I mean, he called them clubs or groups, that he decided to fragment the board of councillors into working groups. That's how we split them. And now he's facilitating them, he's giving them funds and whatnot, which is illegal.
But Section 79 empowers the central government through the Minister for Kampala, okay, to authorize business to continue. KCCA is a body created by the law and therefore supervised by Parliament, audited by the Attorney General. So there is no vacuum at all. The only vacuum is that the mayor had a political problem with the councillors. It's up to them really to behave politically.
The KCCA Act mandates a councillor to consult the people on issues to be discussed in the authority, present views and proposals to the authority, attend sessions of the authority, appoint at least a day to meet the people, report to the electorate the decisions of the authority, and to take part in developmental activities. Lukwago argues that the authority cannot provide an accountability for paying the councillors because they are not performing their work according to the KCCA Act.
A councillor is now redundant. You ask them. They're just loitering at State Hall, just coming around, pick their check, and go away. Where is the will of the people? Because you are supposed to reflect the will of the people. What are they relaying to the people? Because you have to pass the policies first and foremost. And those policies must be implemented by the technical people. Now you are not sitting. There are no policies made by the authority. The technical people are just doing their own business. So which information are you taking to the electorate?
Bernard Luiga, one of the councillors, disagrees with Lukwago's argument.
Even when the mayor was available, still we did not conclude council business. So then it would be very unfair to blame councillors right now for being paid. Which emolument is not being determined by themselves, by the minister.
Despite these arguments, Minister Frank Tumwebaze maintains that Kampala is on the road to becoming a world-class city.
SCC is operating normally. That's why work in the city is very visible. If there was maladministration at City Hall, you would not be seeing roads being done. You would not be seeing the city getting cleaner. You would not be seeing enforcement staff of the garbage collection on duty every hour, every minute.
Tumwebaze and his team are perpetuating illegalities in the sense that they are ignoring the political wing of the authority, which is mandated under the law to pass policies, which policies are supposed to be implemented by the technical wing.
As the two camps await the ruling of the Supreme Court, the status quo at KCCA remains the same. Councillors continue getting paid and work is going on in the absence of the Lord Mayor. Solomon Serwanja, NTV.
The UPDF Chief of Defense Forces has dispatched the 16th contingent of Ugandan soldiers to Somalia to conduct peace support operations in the war-ravaged nation. General Katumba Wamala urged the battle group, composed of 1,440 soldiers, to maintain high standards of discipline in Somalia. Shilandu Huchire reports.
These UPDF troops are the 16th group that Uganda is sending to Somalia to protect the country from Al-Shabaab militants. The Chief of Defense Forces, General Katumba Wamala, gave the soldiers a pep talk about what they should expect in the war-ravaged nation.
Usiende kule ufikirie mambo ni barabara, alafu tunataka kila mtu anayekwenda pale, kila mtu ambaye anaenda nataka rudi nini? Mzima. Hujatumwa pale kufa, umetumwa pale kutekeleza kazi, urudi ukuwe na familia yako.
The army chief says Uganda's peacekeeping mission is still facing a range of challenges despite the gains made so far.
The only limitations which are still possibly affecting the troops on the ground is the lack of air power. We are yet to have the combat helicopters and also the assets for casualty evacuation.
The UPDF is sending 1,440 soldiers to the troubled Horn of African nation that's determined to get rid of the Al-Shabaab insurgents. The troops were flagged off at the Peace Operation Training Center in Singo, Nakaseke district. This contingent, that is codenamed Battle Group 13+, has been training for this mission since December last year. They replaced Battle Group 11+ that recently returned. Uganda peacekeeping troops have been in Somalia since 2007 under the African Union mission in Somalia. The country's contingent has over 6,000 troops, which is the largest number of all troop contributing countries on Somali soil. Shilan Duhuchire, NTV.
The volatile Great Lakes remains one of the leading purchasers of arms from the West as an arms race is underway in the region. Uganda's defense budget for this financial year hit the 1 trillion shilling mark. In Inside this week, we examine the rationale of this expenditure and interrogate whether it was justified.
Uganda's defense budget has hit the 1 trillion shillings mark, an expenditure which reflects largely on the UPDF forays to troubleshoot conflicts in the restive region. Currently, the army is deployed in the neighboring South Sudan to shore up the fragile regime of Salva Kiir against his adversary, Dr. Riek Machar. By the end of April, it was estimated that the UPDF had spent about 40 billion shillings to sustain its mission in the war-racked country. Uganda's troops are also deployed in Somalia and Central African Republic, though largely the bills are picked by the African Union. The current FDC president and former army commander, Major General Mugisha Muntu, says the raising expenditure on defense is not necessary at the time the army has vanquished rebellions.
If that money was going into warfare of soldiers, that would be a different question from what we believe on the destination where that money is going. We got the information that a big chunk of that money is actually not going into defense, but it's just a political slush fund. So defense is just being used as a channel to channel that money for political purposes.
Speaking about the South Sudan conflict, Muntu said there's need to probe further such reckless military adventures.
So it's not likely to see any shift in the political military dynamics within this region until, one, the question of South Sudan is resolved. One would have hoped that we would get countries that could contribute forces that would stabilize South Sudan and UPDF pulls back.
However, a senior presidential advisor on political affairs, David Mafavi, argues that the expenditure is justified because the country must forestall plans of enemy forces.
Kony was kicked out. He was fought. The UPDF blasted him far beyond our borders. And it came, and the president has talked about this repeatedly, it came by doing something about the capabilities of the UPDF, by acquiring certain weaponry, by being able to deploy that weaponry. It didn't just happen.
Mafabi defended the deployment of the army in South Sudan, saying it was strategic as Uganda's historical adversaries could use the crisis to sow mayhem.
The fact that governments have been involved in this conflict and spilling over to Uganda is well known. the fact that governments in the region have been arming negative forces and deploying them against other countries is fact. And Uganda has been a victim of that. That Sudanese conflict was one huge chessboard for the playing out of exactly what you're talking about.
Uganda has allocated $396 million to the defense sector in this financial year's budget, up from $380 million last year. While reading the budget, Uganda's Finance Minister Maria Kiwanuka said the key defense priorities will be in professionalizing its forces, promoting peace efforts in South Sudan and Somalia, and securing the country's interests within the region. But Uganda does not rule the waves in a war-weary region which also faces the growing threat of terrorism. Kenya, which has spent most of the year at war with the Al-Shabaab insurgents, pushed its budget to $1.7 billion from last year's $1.3 billion, where Rwanda, whose troops recently engaged DRC fighters in a shooting war at the border, has raised its defense budget to $90 million from $80 million last year. Uganda's implacable foe, Sudan, could spend as much as $2.4 billion on its defense sector. As countries in the region ramp up their firepower driven by deep-seated suspicion and anticipation of real and imaginary wars, the only likely outcome is the defense expenditure will continue to rise. Emmanuel Mtaizibwa, NTV Weekend Edition.
You're still watching Morning at NTV, and now we cross over to Simon, Joel and Brian to find out what's making news in the press. Good morning, Simon. What do you have to say about Spain's humiliation over the weekend?
Well, I can perfectly understand, Mabel, what fans and nationals of Spain are feeling, and it's clearly stipulated in the name of that country. Just drop the S and then you have pain. But I'm wondering why you, Mabel, would be gloating over the Spain loss when, in essence, your favorite team, England, did not get it any better in their game against
The pitch
Italy.
was bad.
In fact, I'm surprised and impressed that you managed to make it this morning for this show, given the pain that you're feeling over the loss of England. But I must say, it was clear they told their pilot upon landing in Brazil that he should keep the engine of the plane running. Why? Because they won't be there long. Maybe let's wait and see. It's just one game out of 7. Who knows, the tables could turn around. And in fact, some people are saying that Spain could wake up from that pain and eventually win the World Cup. Who knows?
Spain is not Uganda.
Absolutely, Spain is not Uganda. Have a good morning, and we're coming up to you very shortly with what's making it in the headlines in Uganda, not in Spain. Continuing with the World Cup, just while we are all waiting with bated breath for the first game of the United States, or has it been played?
It's going to be played today.
Well, I'm sure the Iraqis know which team to support. Well, here we are on the press review section of the Morning at NTV program, coming to you live from the rooftop of the Kampala Serena Hotel, and it's Monday the 16th of June 2014. We are looking at the Daily Monitor, the Tri-Weekly Observer, and the Daily Red Pepper, with, of course, the usual suspects, Joel and Brian. Good morning, good people.
We seem to have company this morning.
It's okay, just remain behind there.
That's what happens when we adorn ourselves with, not tea, really. It's something about the kind of scents that you have decided to wear today. So good luck, guys. Here we are, starting off with the Daily Monitor this morning. President Museveni is giving his reason as to why he gave NADS to the military. He enumerates them here. It's the headline story in the Daily Monitor. Let's not forget that in recent talk, the president did articulate the fact that NADS officials, civilian as they may be, were not up to the task. And having tried his soldiers, he believes that they are the best people to carry forward such vital government programs such as the National Agricultural and Advisory Services. Now, of course, the lizard, as always, with tongue in cheek, is advising the president to say, you know what, Mr. President, you can as well give them schools and hospitals. And I think that's what I eventually told Colonel Felix Kulaije, the head of politics in the UPDF, when we had this discussion, the big story, not so long ago.
It's interesting the reason the president gives, that, you know, he's moved across the country and he sees Liberation War veterans that are, you know, suffering grueling poverty, and so he feels the army can, you know, sort this out. But so, look, I'm not convinced that the army is a panacea of sorts to literally every challenge we have in this country, you know. We've got to hold people accountable. I would want to see His Excellency the President actually coming out and saying, look, I failed here, because that's what leadership should be. He appointed these people, he did not hold them accountable, he did not monitor them, or at least his juniors, ministers and the likes, you know. As opposed to this blame game of you didn't deliver and so on, it's a time for him to take responsibility. Well, because if they are not monitored, they will do the same thing anyway.
He says his veterans are tested and they can do the job. But, you know, I don't even buy that reason, because I now see this is just a gift to his veterans. To say, okay, since you're broke, manage agriculture and make some money for yourself. I think we're missing the point here. He's talking about veterans being in poverty and not benefiting from NADS, and therefore he's passing on the responsibility of NADS to the army, the active servicemen, to possibly go and using sectarianism, of course.
So we can comfortably conclude that this NADS money is now going to be channeled to veterans.
Exactly. The veterans are not going to be channeling it, but they will be the recipients of this money. Perhaps that's what he's saying. But of course, President Museveni is a man who gives his very many reasons. We are wondering why he's quiet over the demand for him to apologize and revoke the statement that he made over the King of Toro, advising the young man, and these are his words, to, you know, embrace a hunger strike because a boy, well, yeah, those are his words, and advised him that possibly a hunger strike would be the best thing that could happen to him, especially in the looming fear of obesity on his part. And if you're watching us from the town of Fort Portal, in Kabaro district, or other places that call Toro their home, well, clearly we have it in the Observer this morning that you in Toro want to present Museveni apology over the boy talk.
But the king is not even big. It's just
Does it even matter? Look, I listened to that. I watched that clip, you know, and I saw the president talk about this boy and that kind of thing. And I thought, Your Excellency, you get up a bit.
No, but if the president can say this old man, why wouldn't he say this boy?
Well, there are many people in this country that are older than His Excellency the President.
And I am sure, a boy. No. And I'm also sure in terms of age. Wait a minute, I just asked. I mean, how come they never, let them also ask CNN to revoke the statement. They say infant king. One time they call him infant king.
Yeah, that's CNN. Hopefully we can bring them to book, but you see, that's the foreign
also they are the panache of...
No, not at all, but you see,
or the boy king for that matter.
Say, look, can we set some kind of pace? Look, I get bothered when I see members of the opposition insulting the president, calling him all sorts of names. I think that is wrong. If you don't respect the man, I don't agree with much of what he does, but I respect the man's office. That is why I keep saying His Excellency, the President. But look, we would like to see the president doing the same thing, you know, for the rest of the other leaders in this country. He calls opposition people fools, poisonous mushrooms, those things.
Terrorists.
It is not right. You know, this guy, this gentleman, is a king. And for goodness sake,
you know, I am at pains appreciating that, because I come from this culture where we are brutally honest. If Joel, I find you below par and the best description for you is a fool, believe you me, I would say to you whether you are at the altar of the church or in the courtyard of your home or in the market square.
But it doesn't mean it is
you know, wait a minute. And I must accept that for me, my culture is an archaic culture. It is a primitive culture. You people have so civilized.
Yes, you know it is primitive.
Yeah.
You know?
But for us, Bachiga,
think of...
if I thought that you were a little boy, you, Mulondo, clearly to call you a boy, and you know, for us, that's what you see is what you get. I will tell it to you the way it is. You can call us primitive. Maybe I think I'm beginning to appreciate that there are some people who are still as primitive as we, the Bachiga. We will tell it to you the way it is. If we feel you were a boy, for hell's sake, grow a beard and then whatever.
But or still, it's not something to be proud of. Ultimately, you have to graduate from that
your primitivity.
Yes,
you know, from your uncouthness, your unculturedness.
I would use the words of Shakespeare. He said, "A rose by any other name would still smell as sweet."
But
so clearly, you may call us primitive, but I think for us, it's not even about being respectful. It's being brutally honest.
Yeah, you can be brutally honest.
And you see, it was important for the Batoro and the King of Toro to appreciate now what the president feels of them. You see, if the guy had been like men of you cultures which smile with the people, wait behind you are holding a dagger to stab them. There are those cultures where you say, oh, and I'm not using their language, but I'm just saying, I'm using the same, you know, I like you so much.
You've already stabbed yourself.
Exactly. And then behind the back, you're saying, this man should
But leave alone the cultural stuff and whatever the case might be. I think it was very pejorative of His Excellency the President to say that.
Pejorative.
It is important that we be respectful of at least people's positions. If you don't respect the man, respect his position.
There's been an ultimatum, and I heard them speaking. And what's interesting here is the fact that the people who are leading this crusade is not the cabinet of Toro for the most part. It's not even the king himself, but it is the pressure group led by youth. They call themselves the spears.
That's enough.
No, listen, and I'm beginning to look at it from this wider thing. This youth movement, everything is going to be sorted out by the youth. You see any problem in the NRM youth.
Yeah, but
you see any problem in the
when His Excellency the President went to the bush, he went was a young man, he went with the young people.
Listen to me. So I think we need to organize some NTV youth to call upon order in our house sometimes if it really falls apart. What do you think of this? And how much clout? And how much clout do these youth people hold?
Well,
will the president listen to them?
They are very exuberant. Youth move and shake things are the biggest number in this country. The president does listen to youth. You know, you've seen him dishing out money every now and again.
Correctly, and I've been looking at this picture of the so-called youth that has been trending.
Some
around.
Of course are,
in a country where youth are 40 years and perhaps even older. Why wouldn't a 20-something-year-old Royal Highness King be regarded as a boy by a president who looks at youth as 40-year-olds?
Just well, Kasiati, at the end of the day, we can debate this for the whole day. But the fact that this gentleman is a king, I always tell people, Benz ever Benz, whether it's from South Africa or Japan or Germany. Period.
Actually, I understand the Benz. When it runs out of fuel, you don't put 10K, 20K and it runs. You first refill full tank.
So at the end of the day,
let those
the president wants...
That's what I'm saying. I understand.
The president wants to be respected. He needs to give the same respect.
Let's look at it this
Just
way.
like...
Wait a minute. The Bible clearly says that an alive dog is better than a dead lion. Right?
Yes.
Which scripture are you quoting?
Somewhere in the Bible, you know, I have seen it, that an alive dog is better than a dead lion. Benz Evera Benz, fair enough. But if you find a Benz that has been parked, is bush followed, has no tires, it is certainly not on the same
Are you saying that the king of Toro is a Benz that is bush followed?
I'm building my point. It certainly is not as good as a premium that is on the road working. Let's put it down to a king. If you find a king that is feeding off the hands of the state, a king that has, you know, not much himself.
Just like a government which is feeding off of us.
No, listen, governments run people. Now, if a king is feeding off the central government, I mean, I had the youth saying, President Museveni forgets that our children, our forefathers bled to put him in power. And I want to look back today. That king would possibly have no roof over his shoulder. He possibly would not have had an education if it wasn't for the personal magnanimity of President Museveni.
Yeah, and like this bushman came from the bush with nothing, with slippers on their shoes.
Joel, can I build my point? I want to ask my question here. If somebody is feeding, and you have argued it on this show before, Joel, that for us to be able to clamor and say we want to be on the same rate as USA or even the European Union, we must be able to feed ourselves. I think it is high time that if these kingdoms want to hold the central government to their boards, or even to the president himself, they need to be independent of feeding of him like a leech.
But then you're the same people who castigate Buganda when Buganda says the government cannot pay the king 5 million shillings.
There we are. So if a guy is paying you, if a guy is feeding you, if a guy is doing all sorts of things that are to your welfare, I think for the most part, if he calls you a boy, he knows where he's coming from. And if you must say he must apologize, then are you also willing to forfeit the little breaks that you're earning off him? For me, that is the big challenge. I'm looking at it from that side.
So Kasete's bosses you've had, call him a boy any day, any time. We need to move on, guys. Other day, after all, they pay you.
My management in South Africa called me that little bald-headed boy with this spectacled bald-headed boy.
MPs reject tax on private schools. It's interesting. Reactions about the budget are beginning to flock in. Somebody did say that these MPs actually own many of these schools, so this should not come as a surprise.
And by the way, after these statements, I want to understand people who are watching us and speak Rutoro that this is playing devil's advocate, right? But even if you want, please demand for your apology. I will gladly give it because me, I'm not President Museveni. I don't have his guts. Well, let's look at the Observer this morning. Free but not free. Who are we talking about? And yes, we're going back to cultural institutions, and we're talking about the fact that the Attorney General says government will have to discuss on conditions. We'll have discussed conditions which the Kabaka must meet before he is allowed to visit areas like Bururi, Joel, and Koji.
We are back to that. You are Muruli.
You know, yes, I am. It's interesting how politics has infiltrated culture.
So.
What do you mean unproudly so? But I have admitted I am one.
Yes.
It's just that I personally think it is more important for me to be cognizant of the fact that I am Ugandan before I am Muruli, before I am Muchiga, before I am Uganda, and all that, you know. I think primarily we should be Ugandan. Then secondarily we can be whatever else, you know. We are more similar than we are different.
Right.
You know, and
but
that should
well,
be
this is the story that is playing out here. Remember that there was some sigh of relief when we heard that the Kabaka of Buganda is now free to visit all his counties, lost and found, or wherever it is, and that he should not ask permission from anywhere. And they were waking up the headline in the Observer saying, well, there is freedom of movement, but there seems to be a law on trespass, and these are the conditions that they want to be discussing.
Similar to actually what's happening in Toro. We are seeing a lot of politics, and we need to tread carefully here. We might be walking a tightrope because politics is digging in with the Buganda issue, now Toro, and so on. I don't know whether it is a divide and rule kind of scenario.
Talking of which, President Museveni, it is reported by the Observer again that he is now advising on the Mengo land titles. Remember the 200 and something titles that were presented over, only to realize that some of these titles belong to, in fact, Bururi and Kochi for that matter.
But you see now, this is the confusion that, you know, you study these land titles, you take even a long time before you hand them over. What have you been doing before
like
you hand them over?
Now all of a sudden they realize Toro, no, we should slice
it's
off
like
this,
It's
slice
like
off
an
the other.
orchestrated plan to make sure that Buganda and Buruli, all the traditional leaders keep, you know, on this trail of confusion until 2016, then they are given more titles and they vote.
Well, there we have it. Maybe we need to listen to some good news coming into Uganda. And yes, we still reign supreme, at least in this area. We are not Spain. A Ugandan writer scoops the Commonwealth Award, and we have her smiling and looking like Ola, a winner. Jennifer Nansubuga Makumbi wins the overall Writers Award for the Commonwealth Short Stories Prize 2014. She was the regional winner for Africa, but then she came out as overall winner from the following regions of Asia, Europe, the Caribbean, and Canada. I think this is some good news coming to us.
Yes, especially in a country where people say, you know, if you want to hide something from us, put it in a book.
And I'm wondering if she has now written her short story and win this award, so who's going to read the short story? Have you read it?
I know we need to learn to read. We without a doubt, and good leaders are good readers. I was telling some people. Some of the young people, the only book they ever read is Facebook. I hope we can style up a little.
Well,
subscribers, we are told, sue telecom companies over poor network exploitation.
Who are these subscribers? How come they didn't consult me? I would be glad to trade this bad one.
Here you are, you have seen it in the papers. 2 days ago, somebody called me, and at the end of the call, I was actually charged. Your call cost this amount of shit. I was thinking, wait a minute, this person has called me. I am being charged. I did not exactly understand.
My problem, though, is that this case is going to stop there because who are the petitioners?
It doesn't matter. There are subscribers. There are 5 of them. They've gone to court.
It's going to stop there.
No, I find this very interesting. You know, this is a story playing out on page 7 of the Daily Monitor. Please get yourselves a copy. A little strip like this that's taking about, you know, less than a quarter a page. Let's say an eighth of a page. And guess what? We've got an A5 advert coming in from mobile telecom company, MTN. I mean, if my cameraman can zoom into this, I mean, what is this? So, who is the new? Yeah. So, this huge advert is going to pay for space. Is going to pay the newspaper. And then this little thing. So I think these telecom companies, we are stuck with them, these guys.
That is the problem we have now.
This is no less than 7 million Ugandan shillings. Yeah?
Yes.
And this story is free for this newspaper. So if you ask this newspaper, who would they rather vouch for? Is it these guys who are swinging for
exploitation? They know which side of that bread is, but ultimately it's the courts that are going to rule on this particular
case. But the courts are not
going
to rule.
But let's give them a chance.
This has been here for a long time. We have cried over telecom companies cheating us, sending us useless messages, and it never stops.
And funny songs. Somebody calls you and then they hear a Chibakulo song and they're thinking, Joe,
you're in chat.
What happened to you?
And somehow these phones are too loud. You're in chat before you know it. Ice cream is playing in the background. So you're thinking to yourself, well, Simon, this story will probably...
must not certainly like this news, but I'm sure that his company secretary, Mr. Katamba, certainly, who I know possibly is watching this, if he's not jogging, will take this into very serious account. Because, I mean, look, if ordinary voters are asking the president to apologize for derogatory remarks, I think we, the subscribers of your networks, also deserve better.
Yes.
But let's not comment further, because now this is a case that is in court, and we can only hope that the courts do what they are supposed to be doing.
This is a story that will definitely interest Simon. In the red paper this morning, NRM leaders collect signatures to censure Bukenya.
Yeah, you remember His Excellency the President said they asked him about the Bukenya issue, what's going to happen to him, and he said, you relax, you will hear
It's
what's
being taken care of. And
I've just been handed a copy of the East African newspaper here, and we're talking about a couple of things. All the regional governments did read out their budgets. EA rolls out budgets to spur growth, boost trade, we are told. Uganda is unfortunately still lagging behind. Our neighbors, Kenya, for example, their economy is 3 times ours. We need to speed up. We need to speed up. I don't know what we shall do to get there, but we should do something.
Well, there we have it, and now the army is warning the public on wearing military attire. Just tomorrow, I was planning to wear my green fatigue bow tie, only for the army to come out with such a directive, and they are warning especially artists and musicians who, for the most part, do wear bona fide military uniforms for their album launches. And you see these guys take it just beyond these Madoa uniforms you're used to, the green ones. I see some people wearing full ceremonial Navy uniforms. For
some of them call themselves Manya General because of it.
Now
like
General Megadi needs a uniform.
No, please, now, don't tell me about it.
But well, many of them, they do get permission, which is acceptable for artists.
Except this other character who went and denigrated we of the Catholic Church by wearing a prelate's garb. Is it? He calls himself a doctor when he has barely read anything more than newspapers, and then he goes ahead to wear.
Just like reading newspapers.
He goes ahead to wear, Catholic prelate garb, and then even gesticulate and simulate the handing over of sacraments. Well, anyway,
now you realize why the Batoro are very despondent.
Because I hold this musician below contempt. And I don't even know why I brought this up. I think I just made him only famous. Because I hold him in that kind of contempt, I shouldn't even have mentioned it on national TV. But I think there is a point which the arts must respect certain dressings.
In East Africa here, we are told Museveni and Kagame hated abroad, loved at home.
This is an opinion. Let's not say.
Yes, it is an opinion without a doubt.
But
loved at home.
Are they hated abroad?
Especially Kagame, because of his, the way he does operate, and so he does not give a damn.
Our president has become the, for lack of a better word, the backing dog for the Western world. If there's a war somewhere, they call on to us. How can you say?
Did you just say our president has become a what?
Backing dog.
The ones that don't bite.
You, the same people here, have been calling for the respect of institutions and people who hold those institutions. For a man like Mulondo to say that our president has become a backing what? Can you really want to continue with that?
Simon,
but see, if I'm trying to interpret what he's saying, the other day I was talking about, saying corruption must stop and so on. When you back, you should bite. I'm imagining
for me,
that's what Brian
as far as
that's figurative.
Wait a minute. For me, I can allow to say that an alive dog is better than a dead lion. Yes, but for you, the cultured ones, you're not
going to play the mind game on me,
Simon. That's metaphoric. You have read some literature. You should know this.
No, I've never read any literature. Please, I beg to be informed. Anyway, away from the backing whatever that Brian does seem to want to denigrate the office of our president on, new magistrates are heading to Chankwanzi for training. About 29 of the newly appointed magistrates will have to go through some kind of fixing the loose nuts here and there when they got the National Leadership Institute in Chankwanzi.
Why, for goodness sake, we have to take our judges to Chankwanzi? And there's a picture there on the Daily Monitor of 600 university students get police training. I see them brandishing guns and that kind of thing. It's unfortunate that we have given a face to patriotism of this, militarization. To be patriotic, you must learn how to shoot the gun and that kind of thing. And then me, I keep saying, well, I know some of our listeners, viewers, keep telling us to use the correct language, but I think it is absolute nonsense for me to imagine that patriotism is learning how to shoot the gun and that kind of thing. No, patriotism is actually whatever it is that you do. For example, can you do it so that this country?
Maybe
Joel,
if
you are a sweeper,
whatever the case might be. You will continue wallowing, but at the end of the day, if you do not learn how to shoot the gun, you will continue being led by those who shoot the gun.
Yeah, but you see, that's an area we need to move away from, because what has the gun done to us for the last so many years? We have not had a good transition. We have lost lives. Our country has shrunk again and again. We need to move away from that.
Something here in the red paper, NSSF top boss has knifed for fraud, and we've been complaining about liberalization of, this. And now these people, what they do is that they deal with people outside to break the provisions of the NSSF Act. So
well, there we have
How to read this quote of the day in the Daily Monitor. This is Kotido District Chairman, one Callisto Adome on delayed salary. He says, I've tolerated enough for the last 3 months without a salary. I have no food in the house, no charcoal, no water.
What is he saying? Just 3 months when there's a policeman who has not been paid for 4 years.
Well, even if it's 1 month, it doesn't make it right for anybody to go without their pay when it should come.
Why didn't he talk when he was being paid?
But you're talking about
he never talked.
When he was being paid?
Yes.
And the policeman you're talking about?
Why didn't he talk for those who are not being paid?
Excuse me, folks. Now, can we move on from
that?
That
is hypocrisy.
Please take note
Really?
take note of my accent right now.
All right.
You must
Okay,
realize that everything now has a deep
Yes,
and
sir.
here we have it on page 8 of the Daily. I can't contain this for more than a sentence. The United States is giving some 140 billion to boost teaching in local languages. Now, I think this money would be better spent if it was given to you. Anyway, Ugandans learn American accents at no cost. So I think it's good that
I know people, they accompany people to the airport.
I'm glad that now America is saying, come on guys, enough of imitating us. Go and learn your local languages.
So they're actually taking
but now the Americans are
His Excellency, the U.S. Ambassador, in a class with the pupils of Lake Victoria Primary School in NTV on Friday. Were they learning some Luganda?
But you see, there are people who have been propagating this gospel of let our children from about P1 to I think P3 learn everything in their local languages, and I'm thinking, how exactly is that going to work? How are you going to learn these test tubes, burettes and stuff in your local language? How are we going to play out, ultimately? Because you see, after you finish your education, you're not going to say new small cocoon of Buganda, Buluri, I don't know, Chigezi and that kind of thing. Because it's a bigger one, even though we want to have something that is tailor-made, homemade for us. I don't know, something we need to ruminate over.
When we are in school, we are subjected to things like Kapo and Chikopo, which is, the letter Z is not pronounced Z, it's Z. And so if you go back to local languages, you're stifling the ability of kids to actually speak good English. People are at university and they can't read. University.
Because they studied in their local languages.
And two, Americans are now learning how to speak like us. You find an American that can speak.
I don't understand where this discussion is going. So you're saying that the teaching of local languages or the appreciation of local languages by our children, even ourselves, should be something that we should not consider
No, I
seriously.
think it's important that, for one, you don't just know how to speak English. You know your local language, you know your heritage and that kind of thing. But we need to tread carefully.
How, for example, would Mulondo's child know his local language? Mulondo speaks one local language. His wife speaks another local language. They see the child for maybe 2 hours a day because they are working like crazy, and they have a maid that speaks. And they have a maid that speaks a third language, and the child goes to school in an English tutorial class. And yet, we of course expect him to give a speech in the local language to his judges when he finally graduates 20 years ago.
I think parents need to do a lot more. But you see, I'm told children under the age of 5 can actually learn
7 languages.
7, there you go. At a go, as opposed to you that
So then why don't we promote that
so
our children and our children's children possibly also get to learn a bit of their local language?
And we should, without a doubt.
I know
in
peers,
entirety,
we who were born here in this cosmopolitan Bugolobi flats where
we are born, bred and battered here.
There, and they couldn't speak
English.
Of course, a lot of English. But for me, interestingly, that language, our local language was spoken at home. The instructions were in our local language.
Yes.
And it was the deliberate move to move me at secondary school, to Ntare school, so that I'm able to appreciate and speak the local language.
Today there's lots of intermarriages. Somebody from the north marries one from the west and so on, and communication becomes a challenge.
But you see,
find a remedy to it somehow.
Well, at least there's 140 billion coming in from the US, and I think Brian and others who are finding themselves in a situation where their children cannot speak their local language should at least approach the American.
I can speak my local language ably, but for the most part,
and
if
teach your child, you need a bit of that 140 billion Ugandan shillings.
I will teach my own child his. I won't need 140 billion from the US.
I need it, Ambassador Deresi. Please, me at least I need that amount of money. Healthy living this morning as we conclude the press review on this wonderful Monday morning. There is a very disturbing phenomena that is highlighted here, and this is misdiagnosis. Many of you have fallen sick and never seem to recover simply because the doctors cannot tell exactly what you're suffering from. But for the most part, they keep pumping you with more and more medicines. That is what we're talking about in Healthy Living. Your wonderful call out on a Monday morning.
There's a question here in the East African, the Banyamulenge of Congo. Somebody does ask, stateless rebels or victims of historical injustice?
Well, there
Your
we
guess
are.
is as good as mine.
Get yourself a copy of all these newspapers, the East African, the Red Pepper, the Tri-Weekly Observer, and the Daily Monitor. But we also know that on the international scene, away from the World Cup, a lot of disturbing things seem to be happening. It's not only Spain that is in pain, but looks like the northern part of Iraq is reaping more than its just fair share of pain, where some ISIS rebels are taking the bull by the horns. And of course, some people are coming in to plead not guilty, including British Prime Minister Tony Blair, saying their invasion in 2003 is certainly not to blame. Now the question, and linking to you, Mabel, on what's trending on the international scene, one would want to ask, if indeed the Allies had not imported, or should I say exported, their form of democracy in 2003 to Iraq, would it have been a better country than it is today? And the same can be asked of Libya, the same can be asked of Afghanistan, the same can be asked of even Egypt, I hasten to add. Mabel, what else other than that is trending on the international scene?
Thank you very much, Simon. That is actually a very important issue that has been raised. Right now we can see a picture here of the ISIS militant group in Iraq. They claim to have executed these people here. They have taken control of a couple of towns, and these pictures are very chilling. They posted them on social media over the weekend. Still, people cannot really say if the photos are genuine. So we may want to tread a bit cautiously there. But something else you mentioned, Simon, we have here former mayor of London telling Blair to put a sock in it. Why is he saying that? He's saying this because Tony Blair and George Bush are the ones who decided to go into Iraq in about 2003. And he says really it was absolutely it was insane for them to go into that country and think that they would get peace just by removing Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein has been dead for a couple of years now, but we still see these insurgent groups coming up and claiming more lives. He says he was doing it for personal grandeur, and he's just really upset about what is happening. And he says Tony Blair, who is now a special envoy to the Middle East, should not say much. Moving on to sport, not football this time, but the basketball in the US, the NBA. We have the Heat beating, the San Antonio Spurs, winning the 2014 NBA title with a 104-87 win over the Miami Heat in Game 5. And we have Leonard here, who was the MVP of the final game. Onto the BBC website, Iraq conflict. US considers talking with Iran. I'm wondering if this is a case of, you know, your enemy's enemy is my friend. They are thinking that Obama is weighing his options and thinking probably I can consult Iran and we fight Iraq together. Also on BBC, we have Islamists attacking a Kenyan coastal town of Mketoni, and they attacked a police station where they stole weapons and vehicles. They also set the police station on fire, and quite sad there. Palestinian killed as Israeli expands search for youth. Some 3 youth went missing, and the Israelis believe it is Hamas who took them. Hamas deny that, and the Israelis have expanded their search looking for those kidnapped people. Again, here we still see the story on Iraq. Here, embassy staff in Baghdad are being evacuated amid security, which has been tightened as insurgents claim to have massacred so many civilians and soldiers. Now, in the UK still, the Home Secretary Theresa May describes forced marriages as a tragedy for every victim. And a new law is coming into effect. This law will give you up to 7 years sentence under the Anti-Social Behavior Crime and Policing Act 2014 if you are found guilty of taking part or being part of a forced marriage. Ukraine here faces gas cut threat as talks with Russia fail. Ukraine has a huge gas bill and talks have failed. So within an hour or so, we may see the gas companies here actually refusing to supply Ukraine with gas. They're going to cut off gas supplies, and that's something that we shall be watching very closely. And that's all we had for you on the international scene. The big story continues after this break.
You're watching Morning at NTV with Simon Kassiate, Mabel Kebirunji and Brian Mulondo.
Health in Wellness is brought to you by Caring Tech Strength, Panadol Advance.
minutes matter, take Panadol Advance. Panadol Advance is a fast pain reliever with Optizop technology. Caring takes strength. Panadol Advance.
Hey there, Mr. Krabs! Are you ready to party?
I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. I like to move it, move it. You like to move it, move it.
Wow! Hello, fellow motor enthusiastics.
Oh, Mr. Krabs! Isn't there any way for us to return all of them back to normal?
Hey! How'd he do that?
The Red Ranger's a bigger problem than I thought.
It's time to finish this thing up!
What can I do to make them love me again?
What are you drawing, Kitty?
Mega Rangers? Yeah! That's a mega win!
Hello? King Julian, you are truly inspiring. Ow! Sponge pot!
Fantastic!
She was molested when she was 6 by someone she trusted.
The doctors finally walked into the door. They basically were telling me that she had a 5% chance of living.
I couldn't understand how somebody that tells you they loved you, that held you as a child, could abuse you.
Tommy Scott grew up among gang violence, drugs, and poverty in the projects of South Central Los Angeles.
I felt not normal, not good. I wasn't lovable.
As a teen, Melissa discovered that drinking gave some relief.
Tommy is free today and continues to tell people that it was Jesus who changed his life.
The time I spent in prison, I spent putting my ideas together on, how I was going to come back and make it all right.
And I realized my purpose, that I was created to reflect the glory of God.
Duke now realizes why God kept him alive.
These were real people facing desperate situations, just like you and me.
Jesus died to set you free, and he can give you a new heart.
You're watching Morning at NTV with Simon Kasiate, Mabel Kebirunji, and Brian Mulondo.
Thank you for joining us this Monday, the 16th of June. It's about 8 minutes on to 8 o'clock. We now cross over to Simon for today's big story. Good morning, Simon, once again. Whom do you have and what are you talking about today?
I can hear you, but I'm still having an argument here. I think we...
Good morning, Simon.
Good morning, and we're looking at the big story on this wonderful Monday morning, slightly overcast from where we are at the rooftop of the Kampala Serena Hotel. It's the 16th day of June 2014, and this is the day when we commemorate the African child. This is the day that came into being some many years ago after a protest in 1976 over children in the South African shantytown of Soweto. These were protesting against the kind of education that they were having that was designed to perpetuate them further into the apartheid regime. They were taught largely to be domestic helps, little clerks, and not much else. And this led to a debilitating demonstration that saw hundreds of them felled by the South African apartheid forces. From that day on, we commemorate every year the Day of the African Child to be the 16th day of June, and today we're celebrating it together with the rest of the African continent. When we'll be back after this, we'll be discussing further what this means and put in perspective, looking at the continental perspective and the country perspective. 4 years ago, the UNESCO, this is the United Nations agency in charge of children and also talking about science and whatever it is, I forget putting it in full, pardon my low class in P4. A report coming from them in 2010 indicated that Uganda has the highest dropout rate, putting it at 71% of those who do not complete primary education level. Never mind that we've got universal primary education, never mind that we've got universal secondary education, and for the most part, a number of tertiary institutions whose fees should certainly be affordable to the majority of us. Now, looking at the Day of the African Child and putting it in perspective with regard to a focus on the right to education for children in Africa, which is this year's theme, I have the pleasure of hosting Rebecca Kundakwe, who is the project manager, Violence Against Children in Action Aid. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you for the invite.
Rebecca, we're looking at a UNESCO 2010 report that says Uganda has the highest dropout rate.
Yes.
4 years down the road, I'm inclined to believe that this report is just a doomsday kind of exaggeration. Is it true indeed that 71% of those who start in P1 do not conclude 7 years later?
It's not really a DOMS report. Actually, the situation could be even worse than that. One of the things is that with the introduction of the universal primary education in Uganda, we saw a very high shoot of enrollment into primary education. But as you go on, children start dropping out for various reasons. In fact, the recent reports put the figure slightly lower and saying it's 29%, meaning that 29 out of the 100 children that enroll will actually complete education. Now we stop talking about dropout and focus on completion, because the challenge with dropout is that people change school, others migrate, and so it's hard to keep track of who has actually dropped out.
That's what I was about to ask.
Exactly.
How are you sure that these people actually drop out? They simply maybe change school.
That is the idea, and that's why in the current phenomenon, that's another one. That's why in the current phenomenon we talk about completion rate. You take stock of those that enrolled in P1 and those that actually complete P7, and it's just 29% the completion rate of children.
I don't find
in
that.
Uganda.
I mean, where do you get these statistics from, Rebecca? Because you know, when children are beginning school in this part, when the term begins, where I am seated now, I can hardly make it on time for this show because of the traffic jam. One wonders whether children actually own cars. But when the term is off and children are on holiday, there is some sanity in this town. Everybody I know has their children in school, at least where I'm coming from. So people watching you in Kampala and other urban areas are asking themselves, what exactly are you talking about that 29% of people who's enrolled in B1 actually finish?
You know, it's interesting that you talk about the traffic jam in Kampala, and maybe those are people from Kololo, Ntinda, NTV, and so on. If you went to Katanga, even now, it's school time, but you find so many kids on the corridors, along the, you know, the houses seated, or others already trying to make a living, sell chapatis on the road. So there's an issue about discrimination and inequality.
What can possibly be done to this? There's free primary education for everybody.
It's not free, unfortunately, because there are introduction of fees like 10,000 shillings per child.
Rebecca,
in most
now
of these UPE schools.
I mean, let's not pamper irresponsible parenting here. If you cannot afford 10,000 Ugandan shillings to send a child to school, what the hell are you doing?
But then why should we talk about free and compulsory education when we actually know that it's not free?
Then why should we talk about siring of children when you are unable to fend for them? I mean, I think while we are looking at providing an education or a healthcare system for those that are already existing, because it's not their fault, they're already on earth. I think the biggest message should be to we who are in childbearing age, who are irresponsible to go around siring children we are simply unable to afford for, even to the basic of 10,000 shillings in 3 months. And guess what? The parents of these children spend on alcohol and it doesn't come cheap. They spend on cigarettes, they don't come cheap. They spend on illicit sex and it doesn't come cheap.
As we discuss this, let's look back at the theme for this year's Day of the African Child, which is about a child-friendly, quality, free and compulsory education. Now, when most governments ascended to this, it said the government shall have a responsibility to provide free and compulsory education. Now, the UPE policy when it came into Uganda, it was about providing free education. While I don't agree with the fact that parents should produce children who they cannot afford to look after, I think we need to see the principle of free education. I mean, why should, you know, even Kampala people can afford, but if you go to Masaka, if you go to Yumbe, if you go to Moyo, where people are even living on 1 meal a day, and you expect this parent to be able to provide this
you're spending, you're living on 1 poor meal a day, children. You don't have enough energy, but you have enough energy to indulge in activities that bring about 10 children, as opposed to an overfed Kampala guy who has loads of money but has got 2 children. I think there is something wrong with our
Of course, there's something wrong with the high fertility rate in the country.
It's not about fertility, it is about the ignorance of thinking. Like you said, government should provide free and compulsory
education.
Who is government? Government is not a building. Government is you. Wait a minute,
I'm
Rebecca.
a taxpayer.
Exactly. So why should I suffer so high to pay taxes to go and subsidize the cost of living of a guy who is busy producing children? Even right now, as I am working on this show, he's busy sleeping and producing children.
For me, now, Simon, let's also look at the broader issues on dropout rates. free education, absence of free education is one of the issues. But there are issues of access. For example, if a child has to walk over 5 kilometers to access
Is that
a school,
still true?
It is very true. For example, I'll give you an example. In Amdat, Kalita sub-county, there are only 2 primary schools. And this is one of the biggest and the most rural sub-county. So expect that a child will move not less than 5 kilometers to access a school. So what will happen, such a child would walk from Monday to Tuesday and they can't walk any further on Wednesday and Thursday. As a result, they drop out and they can't complete education. There are other factors like...
Let me ask you, Rebecca.
Yes, please.
You have parents and possibly people who are in the generation of your parents.
Yes.
Did they walk a shorter distance to go to school?
Yes, I remember.
They
they would at least walk a shorter distance.
No, I'm not saying
including
you.
myself.
I'm saying your parents and the older ones. Were they walking
Maybe
a shorter
it was
distance?
longer, but then you all have to look at
and
other
more
context
unsafe
issues.
Because
and
remember there were fewer people.
And what I was going to bring out is
there were
that,
a lot of,
for example, one of the reasons for dropout or low completion rates, for example, for the girl child is sexual abuse, issues of defilement, rape and early pregnancies. And one of the reasons is that, these girls at risk. As this child moves these many kilometers to go to school, they find challenges on the way. So this kind of discourages them from going to education. So it's not about free education as such, but other context issues like security. There are issues to do with poverty. Most of these parents, even when they want to take their children to school, they can't even afford an exercise book. However, saying
Rebecca,
that,
we are here whinging about what there is. What is the solution out of this? Certainly it's not just appealing to government to Yambi. No. There must be another solution.
Yeah. I think one of the solutions to this is the fact that we need to have collective responsibility. The government, the parents, the faith-based organizations, and any responsible Ugandan out there to ensure that these children go to school. For example, we rightly say that there's this UPE program, but you find that children in the vicinity of these schools are not actually in school because no one is concerned that why is so-and-so's child not in school when they're of school-bearing age. So this is about collective responsibility to ensure that all these children go to school.
Let me ask
but
you,
there are
Rebecca,
also issues of facilities.
Rebecca,
just a minute, Simon. When these children go to school, what happens? There's this scenario that children are in school but they are not learning. They'll go, the teacher is not yet there, or the teacher is there, they don't have textbooks, or they are not motivated and they're like, so grappled and they can't do anything. So if a child in such a scenario would get demotivated of staying in school. So there are bigger issues about completion of education that we need to address.
It is strange, Rebecca, if exactly you knew who the kind of people watching us are.
Yes.
People who are watching us right now have their children in school. Their children left many minutes ago, and they're looking around, and it is not in their place, really, to go and start chasing little children in the neighborhood who have not gone to school.
And you know what that means? It's a high level of inequality in this country. It's a form of discrimination that possibly the ones watching us, have their children in school.
I don't want you to call that discrimination.
But if
and I've always told people I argue with that you should never feel sorry. Listen, Rebecca,
yes.
And I always use myself as an example at the risk of sounding vain. I should not feel sorry that I denied myself sleep from 5 a.m. this morning to make it here on this show when someone was busy siring children, and therefore I should come here and start thinking, wait a minute, that my child who's going to a school that I'm struggling so hard to afford, I should feel sorry and feel that I'm discriminating against someone who is sleeping while I am working. I think the solution should not be in appealing to our altruism and say, Kasiate, you should put 10% of your salary to helping people whose fathers cannot afford them. We should tell their fathers, one, don't have these children if you cannot afford for them.
Responsible parenting.
Responsible parenting.
I agree.
Number two, if I must ask for government help must be going into whipping those parents who are having children that are not able to food, and
I think it should be beyond that
and
to
putting them into
fulfilling the
compulsory
government's
labor lines.
responsibility of ensuring that there's free, compulsory and quality education.
And I'm asking you, you're going to pay for that, at the end of the day.
Which is okay.
You as a taxpayer and me
yes, we pay
should
for
pay
that.
for that. But why should you and I pay for it? Not to benefit our children. I have
it does benefit our children.
Rebecca, do your children go to school that is paid for by government? Let's be very honest.
At least they pass by to go to a school that is paid for by government. Now, as we discuss this, let's take perspective of over 34 million Ugandans as we do this discussion, and say that if I can afford to pay school fees for my child in a private school, there's a woman somewhere in Binyi sub-county in Kwen, for example, in Koboko district who cannot afford to pay this money in a private school. So what does this person expect by virtue of being a Ugandan? Or what does this child born to this parent expect by virtue of being a child? They expect that the government who is the responsible duty bearer, the primary one duty bearer, is able to provide this quality and compulsory education. So if we take the discussion further beyond us here in Kampala, you find that there is a challenge with the way government is providing quality education. And when you talk about them being in school, it's one thing these children being in school, it's another thing being learning. That's why you've had people complain about the quality of youth today, the quality of graduates. What does this mean? That you have children who are going through the education system, but they're not speaking much. And as a result, that's why we even have some that follow for the education system. So the bigger issue around access to education is much more than just free education, but issues of quality, issues of access, and issues of completion. That is the role of government. What you're saying is identifying a problem which any pedestrian watching us certainly does identify.
Yes.
What solutions does Action Aid, I mean, your name says it all, Action Aid, what does Action Aid bring on the table? Don't tell us what government should do, maybe tell us how it can do it.
The first point is about addressing unequal power relations.
Equal power relations?
Unequal power relations.
You are saying we should all be the same?
No, I'm saying that, you know, we are in a context where we have those that have power, we have the powerless and the powerful people. Now we need to see that people in a certain cube, for example, of powerful, are able to do what constitutes to quality public education. There's an issue of corruption in this country, that even in the current budget we see an increase in the education for the education sector. But it's how much is that going to change the quality of education?
And
in terms of facilities,
yes,
in the
some of that money is lost in corruption, but
however, so one of the solutions we
also what is available
can we
is
address
overwhelmed
corruption?
by the fact that every day we are producing more children than this economy.
That is another point.
You know, in
Simon.
2050 will be 100 Ugandans in this little country here. 100 million Ugandans. Can you imagine 100 million Ugandans?
So you know what you do in such a case? After addressing issues, if you address issues of corruption, for example, you'll be able to invest monies into family planning services and enable mothers access these methods and be able to produce children that they can bear.
They are giving this country free condoms all over the place. Why wouldn't you will?
How many can access them? You know what happens is I was watching a show last night where someone made a call and in 15 minutes they had condoms. If you went to Padel, you don't have call this guy and he gives you the condoms, for example. So it's beyond, you know, we are discussing a situation that is just in Kampala.
You also do not have access to that kind of rampant sex that comes up like you're in the city, because
you know
here
what?
in the city
For your
you have
information,
got
you know what is happening because of less economic activity there, because of the population cloud, because of effect of conflict
the
in
solution
that community.
is sex.
No, not the solution. In most of those areas, there are high chances of sexual business than you'd even find in Kampala. So
There
back
we
to the
have it,
point
and
of
that
what
is
should be
supposed now-
done,
that should now be
there's
my
an
problem.
issue of addressing corruption and ensure that the resources are put into clear use. If you put money into education, let it increase improve school facilities, let it improve teachers' welfare, let it buy textbooks and enable these children to go to school. But I agree with you with the issue of fertility, and I think one of the issues for economic development is addressing the fertility rate we have in the country. So we need to see programs that address such.
Many people look at your statistics and for the most part they are saying for you to justify your sheer existence is to continue churning out all these doomsday kind of statistics that may not necessarily reflect what is on the ground. How would you respond to such an allegation?
Of course, that's really unfair and it's not true. For example, this 29% completion rate is as per the Ministry of Education report. It's not civil society report. You know, the challenge is that when we have some of the government officials come out, they want to protect their jobs. They want to just say what people want to hear and do away from the real facts. That's why actually I'm one of those that disagree with the reduction in poverty levels. If you talk about a reduction in poverty levels, but you go out to Katakwi and you still find people who cannot afford the meal, you find people cannot afford medication.
Wait a minute, this Katakwi place you're talking about is in the Sahara Desert? Or
it's in Uganda, in the Eastern region.
Yes, and I'm asking myself, these are people who get 2 rains in a year, they have got arable land, they have got muscle to themselves. Why can't they afford a meal? If in Uganda it is so fertile that if you put your finger down in the soil, wait a minute, your finger will grow, as said by Professor Ali Mazrui.
You know why it's like that? Even when they will try to grow this cassava, the floods will come away and take them away. So what would the government do in such? Invest in irrigation or, you know, water prevention things, avoid flooding in the area so that people in this area have access to food security, but they're able to get some for sale and earn an income and take their children to school. And actually, as we discuss this, referring to the budget that's been just read, if you talk about investment in agriculture, for me, in relation to how this improves the life of a child in Uganda, it would be interesting to know how the investment to be made in agriculture is going to improve food security, aware that Uganda has one of the highest malnutrition rates, how this is going to improve household income,
what I don't
to allow
understand
parents
and
to take their children
what
to school.
I would want you to possibly educate me and other cynic Ugandans is how we have all this wonderful weather, arable land, and the human resource that increases by the day, and somehow we also, without shame, claim we are unable to feed ourselves. For me, I find that deplorable. That people in Egypt who are surviving off one river that is sourced here in Uganda are able to export to us fruit juices, and we are unable for the most part to store fruit juices in Soroti and Katakwi areas that you've just mentioned.
Let me tell you something.
I just don't understand that.
If you go to the eastern Uganda, I'll give you an example. During a certain period, I think last 1 month ago, you find so many mangoes along the road, and you pick yourself a big Benson at 2,000 shillings.
That's even very high.
That's even
Some
very,
could even come for free, yes.
You'll find a basket of potatoes, you pick it at 2,000 shillings. What does that mean? People are making an effort to cultivate and get something, but they lack access to market. You know, if it was a situation where there is supportive environment, they could be supposed to process this food or even store it so that it can be used at a later time. But it will just die from there in a season of harvest, and then in the next 2 months, you won't find the mangoes and people are dying of hunger.
Does that require government to set up storage centers and all that stuff? Certainly not.
Certainly not, but it has a role in terms of extension workers.
Who have loads of money, who are spending it here in other business ventures or into construction, and they cannot even build a little silo in their homes. So I think that for me, the biggest solution
is,
I mean, for how long, Rebecca, as we conclude this, for how long are we going to whinge about government that has failed to honor his side of the bargain? When we have the human resource here, why don't we appeal to Ugandans to say, look, there are opportunities, we better harness them as private individuals or as private workers. I mean, the private sector that government is always talking about. Why can't we appeal to those? Because government seems to be overstretched, possibly, or
Well, I agree with you on that. We cannot avoid the fact that government has the cardinal responsibility of safeguarding and promoting Uganda, and specifically
I hope that Ugandans will not take your message of saying government has the sole and cardinal responsibility of their children. At the end of the day, people watching us, please ignore Rebecca's message. I can tell you,
this is why I said
that may protect you in security, may give you their low quality education, may give you their poor quality of health services, but at the end of the day, you are solely responsible for the children.
Absolutely.
You produce 20 when you are able to look after half a child.
Absolutely, Simon, and that's why I mentioned about the collective responsibility of everybody in the community, and I'll talk about the importance of the family in ensuring the safety of the children as we celebrate the Day of the African Child. So we need to revive the strength of the family, the revival of community mechanisms in ensuring that a child is brought up in a community that is responsible, that is respecting the rights of others.
Rebecca, I have to cut you short here. Time is not an ally on our side, but certainly I can tell you, you're sounding very good, you're sounding very right, but I think that your message is not in tandem with the times. With this urbanization, the rural-urban migration, in places like Nigeria, let's look at a neighborhood like Nigeria. You're telling someone for community growing, will you allow me to come and whip your child when I find them urinating by the roadside? Certainly not. So I think we need to address the changing times, that we know that at the end of the day, a child is raised by a village, but there are no more villages to talk about for the most part.
That's why it's talked about the issue of the family.
Simon says. The argument certainly is not ending even as we take a break. It continues here, and I'm very sure even after this it will continue. This is not an argument that easily comes to an end, especially if we are commemorating the Day of the African Child and looking specifically at the quality of education the African child is getting. Of course, I will leave you with more questions than answers, because at the end of the day, Rebecca and I did not so much tend to agree on which way forward. Of course, we also understand that beyond the quality of education, we also have got a syllabus and curriculum that for the most part doesn't seem to prepare us for the times to come. Indeed, we should be leading a huge demonstration like this Soweto Children of 1976, because the quality of education, the curriculum that we have, seems to come from those years that only made us able to be mere clerks and support staff, as opposed to being the kind of people that should be holding the reins of their country's development by the bull. Now, as you send your child to school, ask yourself one question. Are they actually learning, or are they being educated? Maybe there needs to be a call for we, the parents, to come in and exactly check on how our children are learning. But also we need to appeal to education institutions, many of them private. Are you able to provide education that is commensurate with the amount of money you siphon from us parents who are able to take our children to those schools? Because I know primary school and nursery school kids who are paying over $1 million, and at the end of the day, we don't seem to see much coming out of them. Question is, aren't you just ripping us off, taking advantage of the dire need for equality education that you seemingly provide but don't actually do provide? What about you who send your child to a public school? You also, I think, need to take the bull by the horns and go there and find out whether indeed your child is learning. But woe unto you who is busy siring children and expecting that government is going to take charge of those children of yours. I can tell you, increasingly, history and posterity, and in fact divine intervention, will judge you so harshly for bringing children onto this earth that you are unable to fulfill your responsibility as a parent too. That is why God had one begotten son. He is able to do everything else, but he had one son. He did not have 20. How can you be able to have 10 children and fend for them properly if you are unable to look after your own self and perhaps even your spouse's self? That is what I leave you as food for thought and the point to ponder on this wonderful Monday morning, the 16th day of June 2014. Have a productive, and I'm saying productive, not reproductive, week. Have a good morning.
You're watching Morning at NTV with Simon Kasiate, Mabel Kebirunji, and Brian Mulondo.
You can bring everybody in parliament as long as they can wake up and vote for their nanny.
As long as the voters exercise their rights to elect their leaders, there was no need for term limits in Uganda.
I know him. I know how he operates. I know how he thinks.
There are ways you can go around these obstacles.
Why should I conduct myself as if I am Muyai?
It's absolutely true. I admired the President Museveni.
Is the ICC a fiscal code targeting African leaders?
You cannot tell me that the whole trouble Kenya had revolved about only 2 individuals.
The money is not in the budget of this financial year.
You can't beat God. You see, God is polygamous also. Look at Jeremiah chapter 31.
The security of this country will largely depend on the contribution that the people make.
Are you and I ever gonna have a chance to be sisters?
You want the baby to have my name?
Would that be okay?
So I'm happy you came.
Yes, especially since I thought you were shunning all things Newman. I have my own reasons for showing up.
What did you say about him?
I'm sorry, attempted rape.
Okay, look, whatever you think you know about him, you don't know his heart.
If there is a way to make me feel more miserable, you will instinctively find it.
You gave up the one woman you loved, and now you're having a hard time figuring out how to move on?
I can't imagine who would want to hurt a good man like you.
Okay, you know what? I don't need you telling me how to feel about Lily.
Are you pregnant? No. Then why are you trying to alienate Tyler?
Has something happened between the two of you? Are you afraid that I'm gonna do something to ruin your marriage, or that you will?
Why don't we have a party? I'll bring Nikki and bring your siblings. How's that?
Now, what are you gonna do? You gonna blackmail them this time, or are you gonna bribe them?
Looks like Mommy's not the only one who knows how to make up a story.
Oluvannyuma lwa lutalo abaana bangi batwalibwa ab'ekika era bulala basigadde
abamu bajja ne babakima
era twagende mu Lukoola eyo nakasongola mu Buluuli twagende mu Butale babalaaro okubuuza omwana oyo mumanyi
nti mukwate obutonde obwekonkome mukwate obutonde bwa Ebola mubuteeke mu nsigo omuzungu ayogedde palamenti muyise bosi basajja omulembe guno gutuusemu n'abantu n'entondo kati waliwo n'emyaka egy'entondo
waliwo yakiŋŋamba
bamugamba muŋŋambe bulungi kati munkwate empola
dokita buli akwata bayibuli eno ajja kusomera bintu nga ye bw'alowooza. For example, waliwo controversy yaliwo tobeera mu suuti ate n'oteeka mu gganduula olina kubeerako kimu
kubanga okusomesezza tumaze emyaka 2 tusomesa bannayuganda eddembe lyammwe mulimanyi oluusi n'obusobozi obulina nakulabira abaganda baagala kabaka
You're watching Morning at NTV with Simon Kasiate, Mabel Kebirunji, and Brian Mulondo.
Thank you for joining us this morning, and today I'm very happy to report we have 20,000 likes on our Facebook page, and that is 8.6% up from last week. So thank you. Do tell your friends about the show, and do tell your friends about the page as well, where it's so interactive. We post usually what is being talked about, and you can let your opinions be known. Today is the Day of the African Child, and some of your comments now, we have Katende saying, right now, we don't have quality children. The way the parents are holding their children is like eggs. The children grow up without discipline, and you impart him or her that kind of abuse. People, when you impart him or her abuse, they don't understand it. Kevis, your message is a bit confusing. Ronnie says, the learning condition, syllabus, and the teachers make children hate school. Ugandan school is all about chiboko and writing notes. This doesn't motivate young people to sit in class. And the government should be held responsible for the dropouts. Someone should go to court and charge the Ugandan government. We have another message here saying, Stuart saying he does not see any reason why we are to celebrate this Day of the African Child, even if these people who are concerned are seated in big buildings when actually their children are also enjoying a good life. Children are suffering in the villages. To make matters worse, who of these kids knows today that it is actually the day of their African child? It is actually their day. And someone again says we should not be celebrating this day because children are still being abused. We shall now cross over to the other side to Brian for Everyday Life. Hello, Brian. Whom do you have today?
Well, thank you so much, Mabel. As the rest of the world celebrated International Youth Day, here in Uganda, government launched a 265 billion fund to help the poor and the unemployed youth. With an unemployment rate of about 83%, will this fund work? What is the difference between the first fund and this fund? Joining me is James Ebitu, who is the program manager of Youth Livelihood Program in the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development. We'll be talking that and more coming up on Everyday Life. Good morning. Well, thank you so much for staying with us this morning. From the Day of the African Child to Youth Fund, we're definitely making sure that whatever you're doing this morning starts at work. James Ebitu, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, good morning.
How are you?
I'm fine.
How's the ministry?
The ministry is fine.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Youth Livelihood Program, first of all, what does it do and what is it about?
Brian and viewers, the Youth Livelihood Program is a Government of Uganda program being implemented under the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development. It is targeting the unemployed and poor youth in this country. And when we talk about youth, we're looking at the age bracket 18 to 30 years. Now, this program is aimed at empowering the youth to harness their socioeconomic potential and increase self-employment opportunities and income levels.
Right.
So this program is going to cover the whole country. It began this financial year. We shall roll it out further to the rest of the districts next financial year.
Right. The first youth fund failed, and government also recognized that it failed. And then you came out with more money, 265 billion shillings, which is good money. And I was very excited about it. I went, wow, they've reviewed the process. Just let me know, what is going to be different about this fund?
First of all, Brian, I would like to say the fund failed. It may have had some challenges. So this one is coming as a complementary intervention to that fund. So you'll be told later, maybe by the permanent secretary or people in the Ministry of Gender, that this money which has already been injected into the banks, that is the Youth Venture Capital Fund, is still there and the youth can access it.
But very few youth have accessed that one.
So that is why we've come with this. This is what I'm talking about, a few challenges in the other one. So this one is trying to address the gaps. In that one, we are talking about participation of the youth. Many youth, as you're aware, complain that they did not know how the beneficiaries were being selected. Now in this one, the youth have been brought in. They'll be involved in the selection, they'll be involved in the approval processes, they'll be involved in the monitoring of the implementation of the program. And that in itself is good. The other thing I could add about this program is that it is a revolving fund which is very friendly to the youth. The terms of accessing it are very, very friendly. First, it does not expect anybody to give us security or physical assets as collateral for the fund. And the payment terms, the interest rate is 0. If you pay within 12 months, it is 0. If you go beyond 12 months, that's when they charge you something like a service fee of 5%, just to take care of inflation.
The initial youth fund, the accusations that those controlling the money, you who is going to give out the money and supervise, were largely giving it to NRM supporters.
This program, like I said, is participatory. And first of all, the money has been allocated to the various districts. There is no money in Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. All the districts have been allocated. All the 12 districts have their indicative planning figures. So the selection of the beneficiaries is the responsibility of the local government authorities. All they submit to us are those that they have approved for funding.
So how
now,
are you going
the
to
criteria
make sure that the local government person does not ask me whether I support FDC or not?
First of all, it's not a requirement. We have a selection criteria which is very, very serious and very clear.
Please
One,
tell us about it.
You must be a youth, you must be resident in some village, and every member of that community knows you, that you are resident there, because that is the only asset we have. It is not emphasizing that you give us physical assets. So your presence as a youth in that community in itself is security for us. And secondly, you have to be in a group.
You will get me when I run out.
Yes, Brian, yes, that is it.
Okay.
And you must be in a group of 10 to 15 youth. Of course, at least 30% of you must be female. And therefore, you are willing to co-guarantee yourselves in case there are challenges. So that makes you personally and severally liable as individuals and as members of a given group. So that is what this is premised on. So the youth are able to follow up stage by stage, and it's very clear. So this business of saying you belong to a political party and so forth, we are also asking the districts that if the youth have submitted their requests, there are those that you are going to approve, and there are those that you are going to defer. Now, if you defer, give us the list of those you have deferred, and also provide reasons why you defer. By the way, we defer for further action, so we don't reject programs or projects that are submitted by the youth. So we follow up. So if there is anything flimsy, we shall pick up that group and ask the districts to review. So they submit to us even the list of those that they defer. And I don't think they can put their political reasons or something like that, but we're able to investigate.
James, someone may argue that by giving this money, because, you know, when I don't know, maybe because I was raised differently. I was raised to work hard for everything. I'll not take something for free. I'll work for, I've earned whatever I've gotten. Someone may ask, aren't you perpetuating the syndrome of dependence? Because you're helping these guys. In the past where they've been given money, we don't have evidence that actually the youth fund has helped them start businesses and they're successful right now. So I guess two questions in one. Aren't you perpetuating the syndrome of dependence? Two, do you have any success stories that we can see that actually the youth fund has changed lives?
Foremost, Brian, I mentioned here that this is a revolving fund, and in itself it's a motivating factor. It is not a free thing that is being given. So the youth know they have to work hard so that they are able to repay this. So in itself, the youth will be targeting repayment as well as continue with their investments to sustain them. So that is why it is a revolving fund. It's not a handout. So if you are lazy, this is not a place for you. We are talking about serious youth. But also factored in this program is the issue of the mindset that you're talking about. So there are other programs that try to deal with our youth mindset so that they improve.
What does that mean? Do you talk to the youth about, because you see, if you give me 1 million shillings for free and I take it, I can disappear before the 12 months. I can actually disappear. And then I get involved in another youth fund in another district. So I'm always going to ask for money from government.
That's why we bring in the element of co-guaranteeing. The members of the group, they should know each and everybody who is in their group. And they should be able to monitor, supervise, follow up in the case of these challenges. Now you asked about the success stories. This financial year, as you may remember, the project was launched on the 24th of January by His Excellency. So the larger part of this second half of the financial year we are building the systems. We are putting in place the required structures to roll out the implementation. And we've just begun the disbursement. Actually, we've disbursed to now a total of 785 youth groups. That is about 5.4 billion Uganda shillings.
So far?
So far. That is what has gone out. But this figure is going to double in this week, and by the end of next week, it should have doubled. So this is when we shall begin realizing the first fruits of this program. And we have a very good M&E system. We shall be feeding you in as we progress.
What is the projected duration of this money? Because if you're just giving out 5 billion, the year is about to end. I'm thinking, when will you spend all the 200?
The 200 billion is what was approved by Parliament for a period of 5 years initially, and this is a rolling plan. It will continue. So for this financial year, we had what was allocated by Minister of Finance, which was 19.2 billion. Some of it has gone into putting the systems in place, and the balance, what I'm telling you about, we shall have about 12 billion going to the youth projects that have been approved by the local governments.
Yeah. I'm probably going to play the devil's advocate, because even before this interview, I asked you, okay, you're giving money to people who have been branded lazy. They don't have jobs, they are unemployed, they can't start up anything. I, Brian Mulondo, have started something. I bring you to my premises, I show you, and I can even write down and tell you that in actually 6 months I'll be able to pay your money. Why aren't you giving me, who has the capacity to even pay back with interest, and then go and, for lack of a better word, waste the money here?
Brian, you have to put it in the context of the target group. Okay. So we are going to handle new and existing group as long as you pass the selection criteria. So you'll find those groups which are just forming, which shall help to grow, and then there are those that are already existing. They just need additional capital so that they come up. So we shall be dealing with those. All we have to do is that whoever is interested in this program, you express that interest. We shall assess you, subject you to the selection criteria, and see how we support you through that.
I've seen some of your target groups here, youth living in slums, high-risk, impoverished communities, which I am not, but I'm still young. Quickly tell us some of your target groups so that we are also clear, because I believe that this is a good thing and it can help, you know, create jobs for young people. But who are you targeting?
Yeah, I've said first and foremost, age bracket 18 to 30 years, and we're looking at youth who have dropped out of schools or in a training institution, youth who are disabled or with disabilities, those living with HIV/AIDS, those who have graduated from tertiary institutions, including universities, but still remain unemployed. And generally, we're talking about youth who have had the opportunity for formal education and those who have not had that opportunity. Rural or urban, we're looking at all of you in totality, and that is what this program stands for.
I fear that we are probably testing something that has not maybe worked somewhere else. It has worked here, and let's be honest, it failed. And you came up with an additional 265 billion, which is also good. If this fails, in your statistics, in your work that you've done as Minister of Gender, have such things worked in other countries where youth are being given money to start their businesses and actually things turn out well? We have an unemployment rate of 83%. Do you even have evidence now that at least there was a 1% reduction? Because the statistic has been like this for 2 years.
Yeah, I think we've not planned to fail. And as I've said, we have put all the measures to try to reduce on these factors that lead to failure. Now, this is based on a model that has been tested. I will not even take you very far. We've had a number of social action funds in this country. The one that is currently running is the Northern Uganda Social Action Fund 2, and is borrowing some of the aspects of that program and brought into this. So we test on that. In other countries
are complaining about the ability of NUSAF to give them jobs. So how do you say that NUSAF is also...
It's just like, it's a conception. One here, you don't expect the youth livelihood program to give you jobs. It's going to facilitate you to get self-employment and get involved in income generating activities of your choice. So it's not that they are providing employment, they're facilitating you to access that. Again, I wanted to mention, there are many countries where this model has been tested. It has worked in Ghana. There's one that is in Liberia. So all this knowledge. We have brought together, drawn lessons from them, and that's what is informing us moving forward.
Right. I have very many questions about this youth fund. You have a revolving fund, 10 to 20 people. You give them, say, 10 million shillings. Each one takes about 500,000 shillings. Is the priority mostly on giving them money or giving them capacity to create those avenues of generating money? Because, again, if someone's mindset is they can't even use 20,000 shillings to create something. Aren't you giving money to youth who will eventually take the money to sports betting?
I think what has to come out very clear is that we are funding viable enterprises. A project that, for instance, has passed the viability analysis. So we have the technical people who have trained to assess these programs to see whether they'll generate profits, income enough to pay the loan and sustain those enterprises. So it's not just anything that the youth come with. Yeah. And I wanted to say it's not a flat figure, 10, 12 million. It depends on the needs, the inputs that the youth require for their program. We have projects as low as 2 million. We have those that have gone to 12.5. It depends on the project and the inputs that are required. So there's a critical assessment of these applications when they come.
Right. Well, James, any last word for the youth that are watching us right now?
Yes, for the youth and the public in general, I want to tell you the Youth Livelihood Program is for real. It is working. We have started disbursement. And all those who have received the funds, we urge you to utilize it effectively. We want to see quality results because it's from this that many of your colleagues who are still lagging behind will learn. We also want to call upon the local governments that are responsible for the selection of these beneficiaries to follow the guidelines meticulously so that what we get is approved and passed, and we don't want this movement back and forth because of department of programs. I thank you very much. Well,
be sure, James, that I'll come and be part of the selection.
You're welcome as long as you add value to the process.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Well, James Abitu this morning, he is the program manager, the Youth Livelihood Program, and he's been talking about the 265 billion shillings that was allocated to help the poor and unemployed youth. Of course, we'll put up more of these details on our Facebook page. Follow up. Ultimately, if you have a population that is unemployed, the rest is potea. And those in authority should definitely make sure that all these opportunities to encourage youth to be entrepreneur best, they should make sure that these are harnessed properly. Otherwise, the youth are the future of Uganda. James, thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome, Brian.
On to a man who says he cannot cheat on sport. If sport were his wife, he would be the most faithful man in the world. Isma, good morning.
Good morning. Like I always say, I would never cheat on sports. My eyes are heavy, my passion unwavering, because there's been a lot of it. Messi has scored his first goal at the World Cup in 8 years. We'll talk about that. I know, Brian, you must be very happy. I'll tell you why I think Italy have put England in a heap of trouble in that group. And probably the biggest result of the tournament so far. Spain 1, Netherlands 5. The under-17 team was in Seychelles over the weekend. They won their game. Then there is Tim Duncan. They won the NBA for the fifth time in 15 years. That's the San Antonio Spurs. That and more when we get to sport.
It's on to 9 o'clock. Stay with us. We'll catch you in about 2 minutes with a sports update and the latest from Brazil 2014. Good morning.
You're watching Morning at NTV with Simon Kasiate, Mabel Kebirunji, and Brian Mulondo.
Hezekiah Walker and the Love Fellowship Choir are coming to Kampala June 27th. Also in concert, Exodus, Judith Babirier, and Romeo Wadong, live at the New Liberty Worship Center International Lugala. Tickets are $150,000, $50,000, and $30,000. On sale at all Payway outlets and the Liberty Worship Center. Call 077-256-9708. Also join us at our special charity meet and greet dinner for cancer treatment, Thursday, June 26th at the Speak Resort. Tickets $200,000. That's June 27th. Hezekiah Walker.
Mikwano gyaffe bana NTV ate naddala mu bannaamu muli gw'emizannyo muli gw'ebyemizannyo gukomyewo 2014 ate mutya kati ate gukyusiza n'obudde gwa 7 kitungulu gwali gwa 9 ne gugoberera ntusanyuka kati gubongereddeko wano malya g'ebyemisana awo so tugubatayize guberetire kintu kyonna kalonda ino byemizannyo omunoli gw'ebyemizannyo mupya 2014 isima waali alagira Argentina yenjo mukubire eddiba lye omukwano gujja kukoma wano ku muli gw'emizannyo naye kasita kinatuuka eri bano ba Messi okulumba abalenzi baffe ba Thiago Silva awo tewali mukwano omuli gw'ebyemizannyo 2014 President.
The average age of the entire national team is under 18. And so
the primary role of Team Uganda is to remain to Division 2.
Probably that's the only thing that can make one or two rugby fans smile, that the clubs are doing well.
The players haven't put on they haven't wore the game faces. They're not the animals we saw last season, because Ferguson had the same group of players and he did deliver the Holy Grail, which is the title.
Running out of airtime can happen to anyone. The next time you recharge, simply dial *161# to get going again.
On the next episode of Deception.
olowooza oyagala okunkangakanga oba amanya n'amanya nze njagala kumpa na kyapa kyange kati kyenjagala kyokka
So you really expect me to just hand it over to you like that?
So I confess and get arrested?
Yes, inevitably. And I will make sure you're let off for time served.
But it's not a good time. Can you come back?
Honey, who is that?
Nobody, please. Sleep.
Deception.
At Orange, we know that running out of airtime can happen to anyone. That's why we bring you Wetase. Simply dial *161# to get going again. Convenience changes with Orange. Today changes with Orange.
Well, if you are caught up with the World Cup fever and feeling all, football, you might definitely have heard this man saying, Bawonye! Bawonye! Isma, every time I've heard you on radio doing that thing, I just remember Tabire and Diva. When did you become a Luganda sports commentator?
I actually started this back in September 2009, thanks to my very, very good friend Michael Chigozi. We're as close as your white shirt and the blue tie. The way they match is how we match. He's a guy who introduced me actually to radio.
Really?
And actually, the first time he introduced me to radio, he asked me to go and work. And at the time, I was basically a sports writer. I imagined, what would I do be discussing sport? I didn't think I would be able to do it, but I've learned it with time. Started with a bit of the English, which is very easy. The Luganda is a bit hard. I've got to say, even up to now, it's a bit hard, but
why
I found
is it
my
harder?
way.
Aren't you more fluent or conversant in Luganda?
Because I think I've spoken more Lusoga all my life than Luganda.
So Lusoga would be easier than English?
I think so. But then it's also extremely limiting in terms of the words you could use, the language. I've always imagined when you're angry in English, there are so many things you could say in Luganda.
Yeah,
we sango we mudde. That's how.
Ikwede wanye apana katonda tadi azamanya. Go! I'm like, is that Isma?
But was it that good?
That was good. That was great. I was very proud of. I was shocked that you would do such a good job. So. Yes, Isma doing his thing on radio. Isma, how could this happen? Literally the best squad in the world.
Yeah.
And I last saw this at Liverpool versus What happened?
Spain, Netherlands, a masterclass in counter-attack. Everyone knows how good the Spaniards are, but especially when they keep the ball. And Louis van Gaal set up his team very nicely. He knew that when they pick the ball off the Spaniards and attack at pace, they're going to get a bit of reward. Of course, the Spaniards had a very good, poor goalkeeper on the day, Ike Casillas, probably accounted for 2 of the goals. Then they also had 2 defenders who are playing like pairing Brian and Mabel in the back line. Sergio Ramos and Piqué. They seemed like there was an ocean between Ramos and Piqué. They were very poor defense. Most of the balls that came in between them, they couldn't do anything. And then you've got to credit the brilliance of Robben and Van Persie. I thought on the day they could have scored 10 or 9 against.
Recovered, clearly.
Yeah, they could have scored 10 or 9 against any team in the world. That's how good they are. But I think tactically, Netherlands were spot on. Go on the counter attack. Don't try to be too much with the ball against Spain. Let them have it. But when you get it, play at pace. Most of the teams that play possession football, and this I would relate to Barcelona and Bayern Munich, is that when teams run at them, like we saw Real Madrid against Bayern Munich in the Champions League last season in the semi-finals, when teams come at them at pace, they are not very comfortable defending against those kind of teams. And I thought the Dutch were brilliant on the day. For me, the result of the tournament so far, will there be a result that beats this? I highly doubt. No one is going to put 5 past Spain.
But we can't write off Spain, can we?
No, you can't. 4 years ago in South Africa, they lost their opening game to Switzerland by 1-0. Of course, that is a minor margin in comparison to this, because the scars left by 5-1 drubbing are totally different. But I have a feeling that they'll recover, but they put themselves in quite a hole, because they have Chile who are winning their games, because Chile beat up on Australia in the same group by 3-1. That means that if Chile pick a draw, which I know they can against Spain, Spain will be in big trouble. They've got to go and win that game.
I'm here trying to look for a quote that my friend at Patrick Oyulu talked about Van Persie, but he kind of showed a contrast between Van Persie of under Sir Alex Ferguson, Van Persie under Moyes, and the Van Persie under Van Gaal is going to be deadly.
Yeah, very possible, because they have a bit of a telepathy, and you can see from the body language he's a lot happier than he was probably under David Moyes. And all these players, I don't know why it depends on who is the manager for them to be that happy. But like I once told you here, it's very easy. A flock of sheep led by a lion is more dangerous than a pride of lions led by a sheep. So in this case, Van Persie could be a sheep, but he has a lion on the bench in Louis van Gaal.
Awesome. I was really... anyway.
Well, moving on to the African teams, we know Cameroon lost to Mexico in the Group A game, a bit disappointing there, but Japan lost to Ivory Coast over the weekend. Any hope for Cameroon, and should the Ivorians be celebrating?
I think the Cameroonians dug themselves quite a hole, because they are extremely inept and up front. I don't think they offered that much in terms of food for thought for the Mexican backline. And that's the reason probably they find themselves in this kind of situation. But while the Cameroonians could be mourning, everyone should be celebrating what the Ivorians did, because to come from a golden against the Japanese, who started by way the better side, especially at the point when Keisuke Honda scored, I was fearing for the Ivorians, because they looked a bit heavy, and the Japanese know how to move the ball a lot quickly between their front guys. And Honda is that brilliant. He turned the backline inside out, and then he gets the goal. And at that point I thought the only thing the Ivorians could do is get physical and cross the ball, and they did exactly that. Get close to them, you're bigger, and that's one thing they did. They went wide when they crossed the ball. It ended up in Wilfred Bonny and Javinho scoring for them. Very, very good result. And I've insisted that if Ivory Coast don't get through this group that has Japan, Colombia, and Greece, please, if you support African teams, don't forgive them. Don't forgive them.
You know, I kind of got stuck yesterday when someone asked me a question. Why, and you'll help me. I think I fumbled a lot and just told myself I'll ask Isma. Why does Africa have 5 countries only representing?
That is the...
And Europe has 16?
They have 13.
What's the logic?
That is the fallacy about who controls FIFA, because it's controlled by Europe. That's why they have all those 13 teams. Another of the things that probably why the Europeans don't support Blatter has wanted to change this. And actually it's thanks to Blatter that Africa has 5 teams, because it used to be 4, and now they've been pushed to 5. They have so many bigger confederations with lesser teams. For example, the Asians still have 4, and actually the others have to go through a playoff. North America don't even have many. I don't think they have so many countries, because they
don't have so many countries, but they have more in terms of ratio.
No, they have only 3 teams. The other 4th one go through a playoff. So in terms of ratio, okay, it's much bigger, because
Africa
they have the least. But that's a power of control. It's where capitalism, the guys who have the money who rule FIFA are the ones who run the show, and that's the reason why I think Africa are blessed. But I think over time, if Africa goes on and does well at the World Cup, it will tweak FIFA's hand to increase this to 5, more than 5. Because when Cameroon got to the quarterfinals back in 1990, that forced FIFA to rethink and give Africa an extra slot to get it to 5.
Because we got competitive.
Exactly. And now there's a plan to increase the World Cup from 32 to 40 teams. If they do that, definitely to 40 teams, because definitely after that, Africa will have more teams in the World Cup.
Maybe
but it's about
Uganda
control.
will get there one day.
But we still do Majani. So we go there and we do Majani. Last time we had 6 countries, and only all of them got out in the first round, if I'm not mistaken, including the host South Africa.
Well, well, I think talking too much about, but maybe you talk. I think Didier Drogba was such an inspiration to the Ivorians when he got in. He brought an energy that was wanted to win that game.
People always look at games in terms of goals and assists. Drogba had neither. But when he came on, you saw the body language. He's a leader. This is a guy, back in the 2000s when they were fighting in a war, that bloody war between the rebels and the government. When Drogba started a press conference and said, we have a qualifier, everyone put their guns down. That's how big and influential he is to everyone. For me, he's more than just a footballer to that Ivory Coast team. Whether he's still fit, whether he still has what it takes to score goals and at this level and get them to the level they want to go, he may not be that. But when he's on the pitch, the body language of the entire team is totally different.
Awesome. You know, I'm very proud of the Ivorians. I think they did well. I'll be supporting them. Then, my good friend,
Argentina.
You are lost on WhatsApp, on Twitter. We looked for you.
You can have this conversation.
What happened to your team?
I told you on Friday the pitch was bad. Did I not? Did I not?
Good, remember?
The pitch was bad, and Rooney was not playing in the right position.
Remember, really?
Exactly.
That's one of the things, because the English have really tried to play Rooney down the left, and it has cost them quite a bit. Of course, he set up a goal for Daniel Sturridge when they came back from a goal down after Claudio Marquez had given the Italians the lead, but eventually the class and poise of the Italians came through, because Mario Balotelli got the second for the Italians to win by 2-1. And the English are in a bit of trouble now. They have to beat Uruguay on Thursday,
which is going to be
very hard,
because they lost to Costa Rica.
Because Uruguay also lost by 3-1. Either team is a bit of a cup final this island. That's why this was called the group of death. And I thought this game would have been probably much easier for both sides had Uruguay won their game, because there you'd know there is too much to lose. Just take the point and look forward to the next games. Now Uruguay go on and lose, and then either side has to win to get through. And the Italians, I've got to give them a lot of credit, because I only thought they handled themselves marginally better. They weren't that much better in terms of performance against the English. For the English, who I thought probably Royalson got his substitutions wrong. The players who was taking off and bring on, there wasn't much of a change. I don't know why Jack Wilshere came on. I don't know what he did on the pitch. I don't know why Adam Lallana came on at that time. Probably should have started the game. Sterling ran out of lengths. Welbeck was troubling the Italians, then he was taken off. He was totally at sea in terms of his substitution, but eventually the Italians good for the result, and they know how to play in the tournaments. They know how to come and get the results that matter, and this is one of them.
You know, I watched Pilar just doing what Pilar is supposed to do.
Yeah.
Very calm, does not run all over the place, passes the ball.
When you're saying does not run all over the place, I see 27 English players do the same.
You know, like Welbeck, Sterling, they're all just running.
And Pirlo is walking.
I think England needs a player of such experience.
They have Carrick. They just don't play him.
Then your team finally played. Messi got. Is it the time? Can we say Messi? Argentina is definitely starting to depend on Messi, or has he?
There's been a change in fortune ever since Messi became captain. Of course, he hasn't performed very well for the national team, and that's the reason why probably he didn't do well in 2010. I actually tried to differ with someone. I don't think it was about Messi. It was about having the wrong manager on the bench. Maradona is the reason Argentina didn't do well back in 2010. But ever since he became captain, he scored 11 goals in 15 games. He's become the leader. Last night, I don't think Argentina played that well, but still Messi found that edge to score that goal against the Bosnia and Herzegovina to win the game by 2-1. And Argentina, they know, in terms of performance, they know they have to improve a lot if they are going to compete at this World Cup. That wasn't the performance, but probably Messi's scoring takes a lot of the attention, because one was saying he hasn't scored in the World Cup. He's now 8 years since he scored at the World Cup. He last scored back in 2006 against the Serbians, did score in 2010. Now that goal probably takes a bit of the attention, and now Messi can start play with a lot more freedom. And I thought last night he was trying a little bit too hard. I didn't like the way he was playing. Yeah, he was trying to do so many things that you could do so little because you're Messi and still win the game.
Is he wanting to be like Neymar? Neymar does it so easily and then scores.
And the kind of things Neymar's done for Brazil, you've got to give him a lot of credit. Not many players score 33 in 50. And he has.
And
he never looks like there's an effort. Yeah, and he's played 50 games. Probably will go and break the Brazilian record. He's only 22. But you never see that kind of effort. He plays with a lot more freedom because the game comes to him. Now, I'd love to see Messi also let the game come to him for Argentina. He tries to go to the game, and that never works out even for the greatest players.
Right.
Okay, what games can we look forward today? We know Ghana is starting out today. Anyone else?
The two African teams are in action today. Iran against Nigeria at 10 p.m. and then Ghana against the USA at 1 a.m. That should be very interesting. The Ghanaians and the Americans do love playing one another. They've met in each of the last two World Cup finals. Should be quite something. But the action gets under with a fit Ronaldo at 7 p.m. Probably the Ghanaian doctor we talked about last week did work. The magic was never there, the witch doctor. Now the Portuguese play the Germans at 7 p.m. There's a lot of familiarity. It's going to be a cracker. That's going to be a cracker. It will be a bit like Spain, Netherlands. Whoever loses will be in a bit of trouble going forward.
All right. Let's talk some local sport. Baby Cranes won 2-1 in Seychelles. Is it Seychelles? That's how you pronounce it.
Yeah.
On Saturday. Didn't we do a good job there? Should we say we are on the track as far as the Africa Youth Championships are concerned?
We are not a regular in terms of these youth competitions because Uganda only are very choosy in terms of attending these competitions. But this one, if the Baby Cranes staying for that amount of time, having won the first leg, they should surely go through. Because while the national team does not win away from, the under-17s went and lead in Seychelles by 2-1. I see no reason why the under-17 team or their coach Mattia Lay, what kind of excuse they would give eventually if they get knocked out of the Africa Youth Championships. The tournament is next year, so there's still a long qualification campaign to come. And I remember the last time we played in this, we had to play Ghana, who have the best youth structures in Africa, and that was very hard for Uganda to contend with. Eventually, got knocked out by Ghana even after we won the first leg and then lost away in Accra by a huge margin. So it's got to be something that the FUFA have got to look forward to, that they can go on and do well in this one.
Right.
Okay, on to in NBA. Earlier, I did talk about.
4 a.m.
Did you even sleep? Yeah, we know that San Antonio Spurs took the title this time against the Miami Heat, and I saw a picture earlier of Leonard, who was the MVP, and I was thinking,
who is that?
Who is this guy?
He's 22. Picked
too
from
young for me,
picked from the D League 3 years ago by the San Antonio Spurs coach Greg Popovich, who has been in charge of a team for 18 years. You're not in a job for 18 years for nothing. Now, Kawhi Leonard is a guy who was never the guy who probably the Spurs needed, because they had a point guard called George Hill, who they traded to the Indiana Pacers. And at the time, Greg Popovich gave the advice that they needed to get bigger. They brought in a big guy who is one of the best defenders in the league. And what does he do? He's MVP in the finals, scored 22 points and 10 rebounds this morning. He's been averaging 17, shooting 61% in the finals. You don't get that in a team that has the big three: Manu Ginobili, Tim Duncan, and Tony Parker, who have won 4 titles before today. Now they have 5 in all, and they've obliterated the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat never looked like champions in this series. The final score for Game 5, where the Heat knew they had to play in terms of elimination and stay in the series, ended 104-87, and this has been the song. This game ended by 17. I think Game 4 ended by a margin of 19. Game 3 ended by a margin of 21. Game 1 ended with a margin of 15. So you cannot even think about which was the better team in the series. It's been the Spurs. And it's a testament, I think, of something to do with revenge. Last year, the Spurs were leading by 5 points with 28 seconds to play in the 4th quarter against the Miami Heat, and they threw that game away. Now they've waited for this chance to get their revenge. And oh dear, they got it in the most dominant fashion. I've not seen the Heat so clueless in a series, even if they lost to the Dallas Mavericks back in 2011. They were so clueless. They didn't look like they're the same team that won the 2 titles in the last 2 years. Congratulations, the San Antonio Spurs. It will be, for me, one of the biggest stories this year.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, tomorrow you should tell us something on golf, and you can catch Ismail later at 1:30 p.m. We have to let him go and sleep before his marathon tonight. And of course, I would have given you Kalango, but yeah, we shall do it on Twitter. Where Ismail is commentating in Uganda and shouting like South American commentators, "Goal! Goal!"
If I have a reason why I want to go to Copacabana Beach, is to listen to one of those commentators or see them
I
in
was
person.
thinking, why don't they give us such commentators at the World Cup? We are there, so let's experience it.
I think they are commentating in Portuguese and some Spanish, so many of us wouldn't understand.
So when the goal reaches, let them switch, just that part. Then
that's one moment. But the one thing that, not only the goals, and this is the last thing probably I would say, is that in Brazil, actually when players do score goals, the game even stops and interviews are done. I remember when Romario scored his 1,000th goal, right. The game stopped for 23 minutes and people came on the pitch and did interviews and then walked off. When Ronaldo made his debut for the Corinthians after leaving, his second debut, after leaving Europe to go back to Brazil, when he scored his first goal, the game stopped, people walked onto the pitch, talked to him, how he felt about it, because the game continued. It's amazing.
Well, Brazil definitely breaking the rules. Isma also tomorrow tell us about why FIFA is literally a supernatural body in the world. I watched the
I love that topic.
Blew my mind. Like, these guys are not taxed, yet they make the most money. It was really, you'll tell us about that tomorrow. Isma at 1:30 p.m. Omumuli with Lumansi and Alan, and Monday, Sports Bar from Club Silk at 10:30 p.m. Make sure you catch that. Africans are doing well except Cameroon. So let's give you the African proverb in honor of Ivory Coast. It's not from Ivory Coast, but South Africa. A clever king is a brother of peace.
Surely. All the greatest kings we studied, I think, in high school or wherever we were, their downfall started with a war. Probably the greatest king I ever read about was Shaka Zulu, because we even had to watch that movie. Who is the guy? Who is the actor in Shaka Zulu?
That's all I remember.
That one, yeah. But that wasn't a clever king, because he tried to annex every kind of kingdom close to him, every chiefdom, and went to war with everyone. And that was the end of Shaka Zulu. Probably so many others went the same way across Africa.
Mabel, we'll pray for England as you resurrect, which I think you won't, but yeah. The World Cup is here. Please make sure you're safe and take care of yourselves. The games are very late in the night. Make sure you take care of your lives. From morning at NTV, it's been a pleasure hanging with you guys for the last 2 hours. Morning show continues with Soul Moment. We'll catch you tomorrow morning again for an exclusive look at the World Cup results. Bye-bye.
You're watching Morning at NTV with Simon Kasiate, Mabel Kebirunji and Brian Mulondo.
NTV, turning on your world.
She was molested when she was 6 by someone she trusted.
The doctors finally walked into the door. They basically were telling me that she had a 5% chance of living.
I couldn't understand how somebody that tells you they loved you, that held you as a child, could abuse you.
Tommy Scott grew up among gang violence, drugs, and poverty in the projects of South Central Los Angeles.
I felt not normal, not good. I wasn't lovable.
As a teen, Melissa discovered that drinking gave some relief.